Today we're going to be taking a look at somewhat legendary director Robert Zemeckis' latest film here. The film essentially positions itself as an attempt of creating a piece specifically via the means of framing the camera in one particular position and leaving it in this one exact spot for the entirety of the movie. Oh, and it desperately tries to remind you that this is a Forrest Gump reunion, you know, like, oh my god, it's Robert Zemeckis, Tom Hanks, Robin Wright and Eric Roth all back together, yay, look, exciting Forrest Gump, all loved that 30 years ago. Well, unfortunately it's 2024 and this film hasn't fared as well as Forrest did. So the film essentially tells of multiple families and settlers alongside the history of this piece of land, which eventually becomes the home of Tom Hanks' character and, well, his family, his parents, his kids. And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly thin and basic, and quite frankly it's just nothing more than dull. And the problem is that no scene lasts longer than a few minutes before jumping to that exact same spot but in a different time period, and this includes some horrifically distracting transitions, which, much like the concept of the framing that they've done in this film, really just kind of fizzles away after about 10 minutes. And every time an intriguing or an attempted emotional scene hits, we just get to experience it so brief, or just cutting away to something completely different and unnecessary to the story. So absolutely no emotional baggage is carried in any capacity. You just don't even get the chance to feel anything about any scene before it just simply cuts away. And then come the times before and after, who I will now refer to as the Hanks family. So we see snippets of love between a caveman and a cavewoman. We'll look at William Franklin owning the house, and then of course there's a flighting pioneer as well in the past. And of course they have to take the Forrest Gump approach to all these elements of the narrative. So for example, we've got a random couple who were seen at various times who live in that property in the 1940s, where the husband invents a reclining chair and calls it the Relax E-Boy. Yeah, it's what essentially becomes the lazy boy. So when I say it's very Gump-like in its approach, this is because it expects the audience to sit and clap because they understand a play on words of some simple wider context, you know, much like the, oh my god, Bubba and Gump, because that's Bubba and that's Gump, and they come together and make the shrimp place that we all know and eaten, except those of us outside of America who have slightly different taste palettes. Even though I'm British, so I can't comment on that too much. And you know, it's very much like the Watergate scene in Forrest Gump as well. It's like, you know, oh wow, look at this, he was involved in Watergate too, you know, it was Forrest who triggered it all. And it's like, okay, just chill. But you know, ultimately it does allow dumber audience members to feel intellectual for the most basic way in a few seconds. And the reality though is that random fragments of history are just thrown directly to American audiences to remind them why they need to be just so proud of that country of theirs. And Zemeckis has really just positioned this ideology throughout his entire career because, you know, it's so fun to look at the person who made reclining chairs and shrimp restaurants, but then we also get reflections of history, such as a brief look at the Spanish influenza, and of course, because it's modern Hollywood, we've got to start comparing that with the one thing that audiences love hearing about every time it randomly pops up. Good old COVID-19, still making its way into mainstream cinema. I haven't chilled out 4 years later yet. So, you know, dear Hollywood, let's just stop talking about that now. It also brushes over other political issues such as BLM, but these deeper themes are just so handled so lightly. They're just completely pointless. There's just absolutely no real need to add any of this in because there's no results that come from it. Now, let's talk about the acting. It's been a pretty rough few years for old Hanks. I mean, 2022 was notably that man's career low point. I mean, say what you want about Elvis, I know a lot of people liked it, but my god, that performance of Colonel Tom Parker was one of the most horrific things I've ever had to sit through in my entire life, and I still can't say what was worse between the big neck prosthetics or him just running around going, "My boy," for the whole duration of the film. It was just so ridiculous. And then, you know, he even had that horrific line delivery of the bit where he just kind of looks into the camera and just goes, "He's white." I mean, that is what we're getting from Tom Hanks now. And then, of course, a couple of months later, he followed that up with another Robert Zemeckis film, and that was Pinocchio, where he played the lead role of Geppetto, something which, in a way, he should have really been born to play a live-action Geppetto. It really, you know, seems like the perfect fit if you're going to put Tom Hanks into one of these. But, you know, it wasn't just him in the movie as a whole. Just, I feel like nobody wanted to be there that whole time. And to be honest, in retrospect, at this point in time where Hanks is, a film where, you know, he wishes this young boy a life and starts dancing around with this young boy, that's probably not going to help the situation when QAnon are on your back about everything. But anyway, I'll digress on that one. So the Hanks of this film is just the overly sentimental, uber-American, traditional working man Tom Hanks, and it's fine. There isn't necessarily an issue with his performance. It's just very generic from what we would expect from a Tom Hanks, Robert Zemeckis film at this point. Something that does work in this film's favour, though, is that the CGI de-aging doesn't hit the uncanny valley, and we know how horrific Zemeckis projects can look for that. It's the Polar Express. But with all this, though, raises the titular question of this video, and that is, what the hell happened to Robert Zemeckis? Who flunked Roger Rabbit's director? How did the once celebrated and legendary director just fall off so hard in the last few years? I mean, the key to much of Zemeckis' work is how it's able to appeal to multiple generations for various reasons. Back to the Future reminds boomers of the post-war teen years while integrating a Gen X character into the era, with the film remaining popular with millennials and eventually being passed to my generation through my Gen X parents. And it's a film we can all relate to and enjoy. And then you've got Who Framed Roger Rabbit, combining the boomers' favourite childhood characters such as Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, with the love found by Gen X, who initially the film was targeted for. But then that's another film which has been passed through the generations to remain such a timeless masterpiece to this day. But it was really the 90s that shook things up for Zemeckis. I mean, despite Forrest Gump winning the Oscar for Best Picture for the film released in 1994, beating out Pulp Fiction of everything, it's honestly just a film that's never resonated with me. I mean, the whole thing just feels so hyper-American and just kind of repeats itself in a, remember this part of American history? Well, you better believe that Forrest Gump was actually there for it, and we're going to use technology to show you just that. And more than anything, it just feels like a fantasy for those who dream of nothing more than that white picket fence life. You know, it's just, the message of the film is just, be simple, conform, do everything everyone tells you to do, and you'll be a massive success. That is not a good message. I do not resonate with that in any capacity. But personal opinions aside, the film was very well loved and seemingly resonates with most boomers and the Gen X crowd. But once you hit the millennium, which is the year that saw the release of both the fantastic horror thriller What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford and Castaway with Tom Hanks, which, you know, very self-explanatory there, his career began to take a downward trajectory after this, because after Castaway came The Polar Express, released in 2004, and that was very much aimed at children my age at the time. As someone who was born in 2000, I was, you know, the start of that target audience for the film. But even that never stuck with us, and with a slew of meh films for a long, long while, to me, 2018's Welcome to Marwen, which began to raise this initial question. A film which I personally found to be watchable, but neither awful nor great. I mean, much of the movie magic was seemingly gone as Steve Carell just had a nice time playing with these action figures, and whilst I'm still yet to see his remake of Roald Dahl's The Witches, which was a film cursed with pandemic time releasing, it was his remake of Pinocchio which really sent him on the career nosedive. What feels like a project with a fragment of potential came on the very, very, very worst Disney live action remakes. And with fellow contenders in that mix, such as 2019's Lion King, that's really not flattering in any capacity. Zemeckis seems to have lost his creative flair and is now instead opting to just try and pioneer a new technology for filmmaking, to utilise new techniques, and he's almost in a way going down the James Cameron path of vanity CGI projects, which, you know, in my opinion, just completely fall flat in every sense of filmmaking, aside from, well, look what we've done with the cameras and the computers. And what it is though with Zemeckis specifically, it very, very much hurts to see a director whose early work meant so much to me in my influence of love and film, and he's just hit a career rock bottom. And as much as I hate to say it, I think it's almost time for him to retire, or at least take some time to think about his next move into a real storyteller again. And he just needs to kind of pioneer film in a way that he did with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is still the best looking animated live action hybrid. Even with so many that try to follow and recreate the glory of that, nothing has even come close, aside from Space Jam. But to sum everything up, here is just the kind of sentimental nonsense which is churned out for the Thanksgiving crowd, and with a $5 million opening weekend for the film, we'll actually be lucky to even remain in cinemas until Thanksgiving. The concept's decent enough, but the execution is beyond poor, with no emotion, no real development, and a visual mess with CGI idea and elements such as that. There's very, very little redemption in here. Nothing that screams timeless classic, which honestly feels like the opposite of the initial intention of the film. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to give this film 2 out of 5. It's watchable at times, but ultimately it's just another stinker from Zemeckis and Hanks. But what else is new at this point? But as they always end, go and see it, decide for yourself. In a bit.